Today on the channel, we are demoing a 90s classic, the Marshall JCM 900. This was an amp released by Marshall Amplification as being a higher gain Marshall amplifier head. And they released 4 versions of this amplifier. The 4100 that we're having, or that I'm demoing today, is one of the earliest versions, or what they consider the dual reverb versions. This is because it actually has 2 reverbs, one for the clean channel and one for the gain channel of this amplifier. They also released a 50 watt version of the dual reverb head, which was known as the 4500 model. Later, they also released what's called the Mark III and the SLX. Both of those were single channel amplifiers, mainly just for the gain enthusiast that was looking for those really high gain, but still British voiced Marshall tones. This amp that we're demoing today was loaned to me by one of my closest friends that has been playing this for over 20 years. He bought this in 1999, right when we were all entering college, and was in some nu metal bands as well as some original rock and cover bands, and has sworn by this amplifier since he's bought it. And so have some of our other friends who have done recording with it, who he's let borrow to tour with it. So I just had to check it out and see what it was all about. Transparently, I had heard a lot of negative reviews about this, that it wasn't tonally the best Marshall, that either the JCM 800s or some of the earlier Marshalls like a JMP or a 1959, some of those were more tonally better than this. But I was very surprised demoing this amplifier how much I liked it, and I could see why he has sworn by this amp for all the years that he has. For the settings today, well, first let's just do kind of a run through of what we have here. So it is 2 channels. There are foot switchable. So there's a clean and a dirty channel. The clean is channel A. The dirty channel is considered channel B on this. They both run their own separate reverb channel, hence the dual reverb designation. They do have the same EQ settings. There's a presence, a bass, middle, treble, and then they also have a gain on channel A and a lead gain on channel B. Additionally, this amp does have an effects loop as well as a switch to change it to 50 watts if you prefer to run it at half power. As far as the settings that I'm using today after dialing this in, I found my preferred settings were as follows. On channel B, which is the higher gain channel, I have the volume right around 6 and the reverb right around 1. On channel A, which is the clean channel, I have the volume right around 7 and the reverb right around 3. As far as my EQ settings go, the bass, middle, and treble are right at 6, 6, and 6. As I've said in previous videos, I really like EQ settings somewhere between 4 and 6 based on the amp that I'm running and how sensitive they are to those EQ controls. One item I found fascinating about this amp is the need for the presence control. On most amps, I typically don't run a lot of presence, if at all. This amp loves it, and I find that the best tones from it come when this amp is right around presence between 8 and 10. I have it dimed at 10, and I really like the tones that I'm getting out of it with that setting. But I just found that to be very unique compared to other amplifiers. Additionally, the preamps have controls for the gain settings as well. On the preamp for channel B, I'm right around 14, because on this amp they actually put the gain to 20, which my buddies and I kind of found humorous with it instead of just putting it to 10. But so this is roughly at 14 out of 20, which would be at about probably 6 or 7 on a normal amplifier. And then the preamp channel A gain, which is the clean channel, is right at about 5 on this. So on the on the preamp channel they just put it to 10, and on the channel B, which is the gain channel, they put it to 20. So I have the gain set directly in the middle for channel A, which is the clean channel. So those are my EQ settings. In terms of my chain today, I'm running it just as I have for other videos. It's going right into my Universal Audio aux box, right into Luna as my DAW. I typically don't run pedals in these videos, and if I ever did, I would inform you that I'm doing that. I mainly don't because I want you to hear the tones from the amplifier, as well as everybody has their own preference and flavors for pedals. So we're not using pedals today. And one thing that I thought was pleasantly surprised about this is that this has so much gain if you want it to, that you really don't need overdrive pedals. In fact, my buddy that I borrowed this from doesn't use pedals at all when he plays with bands. He just directs his guitars right into the front of this and just rocks out in the bands that he plays in. So now that we've gone through that, let's go into some tones. We're going to start with the clean channel, just as I always do in these demos, and then we'll run some examples in the dirty channel, as well as express some thoughts on those, and then wrap it up with some final thoughts. So here we go. So those were some snippets of the clean tones from the JCM 900 by Marshall Amplification in channel A, the clean channel. I was very surprised at how good the clean channel sounds on this Marshall. In a lot of Marshalls, they are more gritty sounding than as clean as what I've heard with this. And I really thought the reverb was nice too. I mean, it's not a Fender, but for someone that's looking for one amplifier that can do the cleans and the dirty gain channel very well, I was pleasantly surprised by the cleans on this. They were pretty defined and pretty unforgiving, which is something that I look for in clean amplifiers. I think the best amplifiers like Two Rocks or High Watts or some of the vintage Fenders like a Vibrolux really force you to play well, and I really thought that this had some of those characteristics in it when there's nothing to hide behind. That's also why I chose a lot of the licks from country tunes to play for this demo, because I thought that it did the country tunes really well. So now let's move on to the gain channel, or channel B. So that was a demo of the high gain channel, or channel B, on the Marshall JCM 900. As you saw during the demo, I used my Abasi Concepts Space T, which is basically just a modern day Telecaster with Fishmans in it, to showcase how high a gain this amp really is, using even a single coil pickup. Very versatile, could get all the classic rock tones. As you heard at the beginning of the demo, I was using a 7-string with dual humbuckers, so it does do a lot of very saturated high gain tones as well. More so than what I found from really most Marshalls, especially most Marshalls without an overdrive. When I owned a JCM 800, I typically used an overdrive like a Boss Super Overdrive or a Horizon Precision Drive or one of the Wild overdrives. Again, this is just using the amplifier itself with no pedals. So I can see how my buddy that I borrowed this from just runs straight into the amp, because especially if you're playing rhythm tones with it, it does a solid high gain rhythm tone right out of the box. Better than most amps that I have played so far. So some final thoughts on the JCM 900. This was a way better and way more versatile amp than I ever imagined it to be. In fact, when we were doing a shootout of these amps at another friend of mine's house, we were so surprised about it. This was actually my favorite amp of the day, and that was with a JCM 800 with the Mr. Scary mod in it. We tried it against a Rock Reverb MK3, which is a different voiced amp, I understand, but the JCM 800 has really held a high standing in terms of the Marshalls that I love and look for tones from, especially since I'm a big Zakk Wylde fan, and JCM 800s and Zakk Wylde are pretty synonymous together. So I really like that type of tone, and I just found that this really shocked me quite a bit. Now, one part of that I did forget to mention at the beginning of this video is that about 20 years ago, my friend took this to renowned amp builder and servicer George Metropolis to basically do a retube, add a new fuse to it, and he said something to George about the low gain tones that he wasn't able to get. At the time, my buddy was playing pretty much 7-string guitars in the bands that he was in, and he was really looking for that defined tone that most artists were using Mesa Boogies for, particularly like dual and triple Rex back in that time frame. And so he took this to George. And it doesn't sound like George did a lot to it, but one item in particular that we noticed, especially when I took the back panel off of it, because I was curious, is that this amp, or this JCM 900, has 6L6 GCs in it versus the EL34s or 5881s. Doing some research on that, those are a higher wattage tube, so there's a little bit more headroom, a little bit more power. And I definitely think it does influence the tone of this particular JCM 900. In fact, like I said, it's the best one that I've heard. Everybody that's heard it around these parts likes it quite a bit in terms of our musicians friend group. So I would suggest that if you are looking at purchasing one of these JCM 900s, that you might want to check with a local tech about putting 6L6 GCs into it. I don't know what that requires. I'm just saying I'm sure that George Metropolis rebiased it to be at the right level for these type of tubes, but these are definitely not the stock tubes that came with this amp. I also found that the tubes that are in here are JJs, so they are readily available tubes for purchase today. So it wasn't anything that was special 20 years ago, or some sort of tongue sole, or golden fleece tube that is available, or that you pay exorbitant amounts of money for. These are JJs, which are readily available and used in most amps today, particularly after the major tube factory fires that occurred during the COVID years. So another thing I think is really unique about the JCM 900, and a really great value for potential buyers, is that these amps used are not at the same price points as like JCM 800s or some of the more renowned Marshalls. Most of these are going, from the latest reverb check, between $700 to $900, or sometimes up to like $1,800. But a JCM 800 new is going to cost you around $3,500 or $3,600, especially with the Marshall price increases that have occurred in the last couple of years. So in my opinion, this is an extremely great value for somebody looking for, that Marshall tone that gives you a little bit more oomph with it than what you'd particularly find. And it's 2-channel, so it's in the clean channel sounds pretty good on it. So if you're looking for an all-tube Marshall that is going to get you those classic rock tones, get you some of those clean tones. Again, I personally prefer like Fender clean tones, but this is probably the best Marshall clean tone, especially in a high gain or rock oriented head that I've heard. This is a great buy, and I would highly recommend it if you're out there looking. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you have any questions, again, I'm kind of coming back to this after a hand injury that I had, so it's been a while since I've posted a video, but I'm trying to respond to all the questions or comments. If you do have any for me, please let me know. Comment if you like what you're finding on here. Like the page. This is kind of just a fun project for me, for something that I love to do, and it's go through gear and talk about it and just learn more and more by the day. So appreciate you watching, and until next time.